There is a single word in the Qur'an so powerful, so profound, so magnificently complete, that Allah chose it alone to open an entire surah. Just one word. Not a sentence, not a paragraph, not an introduction or explanation. Just one solitary, breathtaking word that contains within it the seed of everything that follows, that shapes and colors, and gives meaning to every single ayah that comes after it. That word is Ar-Rahman. And what makes this even more extraordinary is that a young woman, once read this surah, encountered that beautiful opening, felt her heart warming toward Allah's love and mercy and care, and then continued reading and found herself face to face with one of the most graphic, terrifying, vivid descriptions of hellfire anywhere in the entire Qur'an. She was so shaken, so confused, so disturbed by what felt like a jarring contradiction, that she left Islam entirely. She couldn't reconcile the loving, caring, merciful God of the opening with the terrifying judge of the middle sections. And her story, her confusion, her crisis of faith, reveals something profound about how deeply we misunderstand this surah, and perhaps how deeply we misunderstand the nature of Allah's mercy itself. Today, we're going to take a journey that will change the way you understand not just this surah, but your entire relationship with Allah. Surah Ar-Rahman occupies a unique and extraordinary position among the chapters of the Qur'an. It is described by scholars, students, and ordinary believers alike as one of the most audibly beautiful, one of the most emotionally moving, and one of the most intellectually profound surahs in the entire book of Allah. Its beauty operates on multiple dimensions simultaneously. When you hear it recited in a beautiful voice, something happens to the human soul that is difficult to describe in rational terms. A stirring, an awakening, a recognition of something greater than oneself. When you understand its meaning, when you grasp the connections between its parts, when you begin to see how each element relates to every other element in this magnificently constructed chapter, the experience transforms from simply beautiful to absolutely overwhelming. This is a surah that has brought hardened people to tears, that has brought those distant from faith back to their Creator, that has served as an entry point into deeper understanding of the Qur'an for countless millions of people throughout Islamic history. Allah made a very deliberate, significant decision about where the ayahs of this surah would stop, where the verses would be divided, and how the chapter would open. This was not arbitrary, not accidental, not the result of human editorial decisions. Every aspect of the Qur'an's structure, every pause and stopping point, every chapter division reflects divine wisdom and intentional design. And Allah chose to begin this entire magnificent surah with a single word. Just one word to open a chapter that contains within it some of the most sweeping, comprehensive theological content anywhere in the Qur'an, covering the nature of Allah, the greatness of His revelation, the wonders of His creation, the terrifying reality of Judgment Day, and the incomprehensible beauty of two different janans, described for two different groups of believers. All of this emerges from a single word, Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, the continuously merciful, the one whose mercy encompasses everything in existence. The story of that young woman who left Islam because of this surah deserves careful attention, because her confusion is understandable and her experience reveals something important about how we approach the Qur'an. She opened Surah Ar-Rahman and encountered an immediate atmosphere of beauty, love, and mercy. Allah is Ar-Rahman, the most loving, the most caring, the source of all mercy in existence. Her heart responded naturally and warmly to this description. She felt drawn in, felt the love of Allah reaching toward her through the words on the page. And then she continued reading and found herself in the middle of what can only be described as one of the most vivid, graphic, detailed, unflinching descriptions of hellfire and divine punishment found anywhere in Islamic scripture. It felt like whiplashed from the gentlest, most tender description of divine love to the most terrifying scenes of divine justice. How could these two things exist in the same chapter? How could a surah named after Allah's mercy and love contain such terrifying content? When she was sat down and the surah was carefully explained to her, when she began to understand what was actually happening in those middle sections, what was being described, what the context of that terrifying judgment was, the confusion began to resolve. And this is the key that unlocks the entire surah. The graphic description of hellfire and terrifying judgment in Surah Ar-Rahman is specifically, exclusively, precisely what the criminals will face on Judgment Day. Not ordinary human beings. Not imperfect Muslims struggling with their faith. Not people who made mistakes and sought forgiveness. The criminal, and in particular the specific criminals being described in this context, are those among human beings who were backed up and supported by the jinn in their evil. Those who had systematically chosen corruption and transgression despite being fully aware of truth. Those who had rejected mercy when it was offered to them continuously and generously. Understanding this distinction transforms the entire experience of reading the surah. The mercy of Ar-Rahman doesn't disappear in those middle sections, it's still present, still framing everything. But the mercy of Allah doesn't eliminate His justice. True mercy includes accountability. A judge who never holds anyone responsible for their crimes against others is unaxia, merciful not to the victims, not to society, not to justice itself. The terrifying scenes of Judgment Day in Surah Ar-Rahman exist within a framework of mercy precisely because they demonstrate that wrongdoing will be addressed, that victims will receive justice, that corruption doesn't triumph permanently, that the universe is ultimately governed by truth and righteousness rather than by whoever happens to have the most power at any given moment. The structure of Surah Ar-Rahman is one of its most remarkable features, and understanding this structure is essential for understanding its message. The surah contains 5 major sections that transition into one another. And these transitions aren't arbitrary or random. They are intentional, meaningful, interconnected, in ways that create a profound and comprehensive message. The first section describes the greatness of the Qur'an itself, establishing that the greatest act of mercy Allah has ever shown to humanity is the revelation of His book. This is a bold, counterintuitive claim that deserves careful consideration. One might expect the greatest act of divine mercy to be the creation of the universe, or the provision of air and water and food and shelter, or the gift of life itself, or the beauty of the natural world. All of these are indeed acts of divine mercy. But Allah is telling us that above all of these, the teaching of the Qur'an is His supreme act of rahmah, His ultimate expression of care and love for humanity. Why would this be? Why would a book, however profound, outrank the creation of the entire universe as an act of divine mercy? The answer requires understanding what the Qur'an actually is and what it actually does. The universe provides for our physical existence. It gives us air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, a habitable environment in which to live our temporal lives. All of this is necessary and valuable and genuinely merciful, but it addresses only the temporary, physical dimension of human existence. The Qur'an addresses something deeper, something more essential to what we actually are as human beings. It addresses the soul. It provides guidance for navigating the infinitely complex moral landscape of human life. It answers the questions that no scientific discovery can answer. Why are we here? What are we supposed to do with the brief time we have? What is the nature of good and evil? How do we relate to our Creator, to each other, to ourselves? What happens after death? What is the purpose of suffering? What is the nature of justice? Without answers to these questions, we are, in a profound sense, lost. We can have every physical comfort and material provision and still be completely lost, completely without direction, completely unable to understand our own existence or make meaningful choices about how to live. The Qur'an provides the map for the journey of human life. It's the instruction manual for being human in the fullest sense. And this is why Allah identifies its teaching, its revelation, its guidance as the supreme act of His rahmah, His mercy. He didn't just create us and place us in a physical environment and leave us to figure things out alone. He sent the ultimate guidance, the definitive answer to the ultimate questions. Because He's Ar-Rahman, the one whose mercy encompasses the whole of human existence, including its deepest, most essential needs. The second major section of Surah Ar-Rahman moves from the greatness of the Qur'an to the remarkable, breathtaking creations of Allah that surround us. And here's where one of the most profound structural insights of the surah emerges, an insight captured beautifully in a description of how the sky and the earth create 2 entirely different dimensions of our relationship with Allah. When you contemplate the sky, its vastness, its mysteries, the scale of the cosmos, the incomprehensible distances and forces and energies and structures that fill the universe, you encounter something that fills you with awe, that makes you feel genuinely small and humble, that generates a consciousness of Allah's absolute power and majesty. The sky perspective, the cosmic perspective, creates within you a sense of awe of Allah, a healthy and appropriate fear of Allah, a mindfulness of Allah that comes from recognizing how entirely beyond your comprehension He truly is. But when you turn to the earth, to the food that grows from it, to the rivers that flow across it, to the trees that bear fruit, to the animals that graze on it, to the colors and textures and tastes and smells of the natural world you encounter, something that fills your heart with gratitude and love. These are the provisions that Allah has prepared specifically for living beings, specifically for the enjoyment and sustenance of His creation. The earth's perspective generates love for Allah, gratitude to Allah, appreciation of Allah as a generous provider who cares about your enjoyment, your pleasure, your sustenance, your delight. So the sky and the earth together create two complementary, necessary, balanced dimensions of the relationship between a human being and their creator. From the sky comes awe, fear, mindfulness, humility. From the earth comes love, gratitude, appreciation, warmth. A healthy relationship with Allah contains both of these dimensions in balance: the reverence that comes from understanding His power and the love that comes from experiencing His generosity. This dual structure of the surah reflects a profound understanding of human psychology and spiritual development. Some people relate to Allah primarily through fear and awe, experiencing Him mainly as the all-powerful judge before whom they must stand accountable. This creates a certain kind of motivation to avoid wrong. But without the complement of love and gratitude, it can become oppressive, generating anxiety rather than genuine devotion. Other people relate to Allah primarily through love and gratitude, experiencing Him mainly as the generous, caring provider. This creates a certain kind of warmth and affection, but without the complement of awe and reverence, it can lead to taking Allah's mercy for granted, to an excessively casual relationship with divine commands, to the assumption that nothing one does really matters because Allah is loving and will forgive everything regardless. Surah Ar-Rahman refuses to allow either imbalance. It holds both dimensions together, insisting that a genuine, healthy, complete relationship with Allah must contain both awe and love, both reverence and gratitude, both fear and affection.
Running through the entire surah like a golden thread, like a refrain that recurs again and again, is one of the most famous ayahs in the entire Qur'an. Fabiai Aloi Rabikoma took it hibben. So which of the favors of your Lord do you deny? This refrain appears 31 times in the surah, which is itself one of the most remarkable structural features of any chapter in the Qur'an. And crucially, it's addressed not just to humans, but to humans and jinn together, to the full range of intelligent, responsible beings that Allah has created and to whom He has extended His mercy and His revelation. Each time this question appears, it's asked in the context of a different favor, a different blessing, a different dimension of Allah's creative generosity or divine mercy. And each time it appears, the question deepens in meaning, because by the time you've read it for the 15th time, for the 20th time, for the 30th time, it's no longer just a rhetorical question. It becomes a personal challenge, a direct confrontation with your own heart, an invitation to sit quietly and honestly ask yourself, which of these favors am I actually denying? In my daily life, in my attitudes, in my behavior, which of Allah's blessings am I taking for granted, ignoring, or actively refusing to acknowledge? The third section of the surah presents the terrifying scenes of Judgment Day, the graphic descriptions of punishment for the criminals, the devastating consequences of a life spent in rejection of truth and mercy and divine guidance. As we've already established, this section must be understood in its proper context. It's describing what awaits specific categories of criminals, not the general destiny of flawed, struggling, sinful, but genuinely striving believers. But even understood in this context, this section serves a vital function in the overall architecture of the surah. It provides the necessary counterweight to the mercy and beauty of the other sections. It reminds us that the rahmah of Allah is not cheap, not automatic, not available without conditions, not extended regardless of how we choose to respond to it. Mercy offered, rejected, and continuously spurned generates accountability. The universe operates on principles of justice as well as mercy, and both must be present for the system to be coherent and trustworthy. This section also, paradoxically, deepens our appreciation of the mercy being described elsewhere in the surah. When you understand what the alternative is, when you grasp what a life of rejection of Allah's guidance leads to, the mercy being offered takes on greater weight, greater significance, greater value. The descriptions of Jannah that follow in the 4th and 5th sections of the surah become even more magnificent, even more precious, even more desirable when understood against the backdrop of what exists as the alternative for those who squander their opportunity to respond to Allah's mercy. And then come the descriptions of Jannah, not one Jannah, but two, not one level of paradise, but two distinct descriptions of two distinct Jannahs provided to two different groups of believers. This is one of the most remarkable and unexpected features of Surah Ar-Rahman. Most people know that Islamic theology describes multiple levels of paradise, but the specific structure of having two paired Jannah descriptions in this surah, each complementing and contrasting with the other, creates something extraordinarily beautiful. The first pair of Jannahs is described with certain qualities, certain imagery, certain pleasures and landscapes and experiences. Then the second pair of Jannahs is described with different qualities, somewhat more modest, but still incomprehensibly beautiful, speaking to a different level of attainment, a different quality of relationship with Allah. Together, these two descriptions communicate something important, that Allah's mercy is sufficiently vast and generous to create not just one destination for believers, but multiple, each suited to different spiritual capacities and achievements, none of them anything less than unimaginably wonderful.
What makes Surah Ar-Rahman particularly relevant and meaningful for the month of Ramadan is the extraordinary connection between the surah's central theme and the special nature of this month. The surah opens by identifying the greatest act of divine mercy as the teaching of the Qur'an. Ramadan is the month in which the Qur'an was revealed, the month that is defined by its relationship to the Qur'an, the month in which Muslims everywhere increase their engagement with the Qur'an through reading, listening, memorization, and reflection. So studying Surah Ar-Rahman during Ramadan creates a beautiful convergence. We are taking the mercy and love of Allah that is already specially present and intensified during this blessed month, and we are combining it with the study of the surah that is most comprehensively and explicitly about Allah's love and mercy expressed through the Qur'an itself. There is something almost perfect about this pairing, something that makes Ramadan the ideal time for a deep dive into this particular surah. One of the most striking things about genuinely deep Quranic study is how a single word can unfold into paragraphs, pages, entire conversations of meaning. This is one of the characteristics that distinguishes authentic Quranic scholarship from surface-level reading. When you read the Qur'an in translation, you get the basic meaning, you understand what's being said at the most fundamental level. But so much of what makes the Qur'an extraordinary is linguistic precision, its layered meanings. The way individual words carry entire theological frameworks is invisible in translation. When a scholar who has spent decades studying Arabic and the sciences of Quranic interpretation opens up a word like Ar-Rahman, they're not just explaining what the word means in dictionary terms. They're revealing the network of associations, implications, connotations, and connections that this word carries within the Arabic language, within Islamic theology, within the structure of the Qur'an itself. One word really can open up into paragraphs, into entire conversations, into a fundamentally different way of seeing and understanding everything else around it. This is why deep Quranic study is described as one of the greatest blessings Allah can bestow on a person. You can spend your entire life becoming expert in physics, chemistry, mathematics, history, economics, medicine, or any other field of human knowledge, and all of that knowledge has value and significance. But to actually learn the Qur'an, to understand its language, to grasp its structure, to penetrate its meanings, to apply its wisdom to the actual experience of living a human life, this is described as being in a different category altogether, as being one of the highest of divine blessings, as being something that transforms not just what you know but who you are. There's a deeply moving observation about what happened when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, began receiving the Qur'an. Rather than his life becoming easier, rather than his challenges being immediately resolved, rather than success and acceptance following naturally from the divine message, the opposite occurred. His life became harder. People who had previously respected him began to hate him. His own family members, people who had known him his entire life and had always considered him honest and trustworthy, turned against him. The Qur'an came with a message that disturbed comfortable arrangements, challenged entrenched power structures, disrupted existing social hierarchies, and demanded fundamental transformation. It wasn't an easy message, and receiving it wasn't an easy experience. So if you find that coming toward the Qur'an in your own life seems to coincide with difficulties, with challenges, With situations that require greater patience and perseverance, this is actually a sign of a profound connection rather than a sign that something is wrong. You are walking, in some meaningful sense, in the footsteps of the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, who received the ultimate divine message and found that the path of truth is not the path of least resistance.
The goal of this particular study of Surah Ar-Rahman is to go beyond translation, beyond brief explanation, beyond surface-level engagement with the text. The aspiration is a genuine deep dive into the profound wisdom of this surah, an exploration of how each of its 5 major sections connects to every other section, how the transitions from the description of the Qur'an to the wonders of creation to the terrifying scenes of judgment, dates with the 2 jannahs all flow naturally and meaningfully into each other, how the echo of the repeated refrain about which favors you deny holds all of these diverse elements together into a unified, coherent, comprehensive message. Understanding all 5 of these interconnected elements and how they weave together is what transforms reading this surah from a beautiful experience into a transformative one. The practical aspiration for anyone engaging deeply with this surah is particularly beautiful and meaningful. By the time Ramadan concludes, by the time this sacred month has run its course, the goal is that you emerge from it with not just knowledge about Surah Ar-Rahman, but a deep, insightful, personally intimate connection with this incredible chapter of the Qur'an. The kind of connection that transforms prayer. Because when you stand to pray and you recite even a few ayahs of Surah Ar-Rahman, if you have genuinely internalized its meanings, its structure, its beauty, its wisdom, then those ayahs come alive in your recitation in a way that is completely different from reciting words whose meaning you penetrate. Every phrase becomes a conversation with your Creator. Every ayah becomes a window into divine wisdom. Every recitation becomes a completely transformative experience rather than a habitual performance. This Ramadan represents an extraordinary opportunity to move the Quran from the periphery to the central in your life, from the background to the foreground, from a book you respect, but perhaps don't fully understand, to a living, breathing, personally meaningful guide for navigating the actual experience of your life. Surah Ar-Rahman, with its beauty and its depth and its comprehensive vision of divine mercy and divine justice and the wonders of creation and the reality of accountability and the unimaginable generosity of Jannah, is perhaps the perfect gateway into this deeper relationship. The Qur'an is, in a very real sense, your ultimate guide. More comprehensive than any search engine, more wise than any artificial intelligence, more personally relevant than any self-help book, because it comes from the one who created you and knows you more completely than you know yourself. May this Ramadan be the moment when that relationship deepens into something truly transformative, truly life-changing, truly worthy of the extraordinary gift that this book represents.